Claire barely had time to set her paper plate down before her sister clinked a spoon against a glass. "Everyone, before we cut the birthday cake, I have something important to say." The room fell silent. Monica stepped to the center of the decorated living room, one hand resting on her 1-year-old daughter's stroller. In the other, she held several folded papers. She looked directly at me. My daughter deserves to know who her father really was. My stomach tightened. Then she raised the papers high enough for everyone to see. "My daughter is Daniel's child." Gasps swept through the room. Before we continue, drop your city and country in the comments below. And if you enjoy revenge stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. And since Claire inherited Daniel's $950,000 lake house after he died, Monica continued, unfolding the pages with dramatic precision, "My daughter is legally entitled to half of it." Someone whispered, "No." Another relative slowly turned toward me. Monica smiled as if she'd rehearsed every second. "I even have Daniel's will." She waved the document in the air. Every pair of eyes landed on me, waiting for tears, anger, denial. Instead, I looked at the papers, smiled softly, and said, "Oh, I see." Monica's confident grin widened. She thought I'd just given up. What she didn't realize was that one detail on those pages had already caught my attention. Only 4 days earlier, I had stood beside Daniel's casket while friends and family shared stories about the kind of man he'd been. After 20 years of marriage, saying goodbye had already taken everything I had left. I almost hadn't attended my niece's first birthday. My mother insisted. "It'll be good for everyone to be together," she'd said. "Your niece shouldn't remember this year only because of loss." I wanted to believe that. Instead, I walked into a room filled with balloons, birthday banners, and smiling relatives who had hugged me at the memorial only days before. Now those same faces were studying me like I was the woman who had kept a terrible secret. Monica folded her arms. "You don't have anything to say, Claire." I met her eyes. "I'd like to understand what you're claiming." "I'm claiming Daniel was my daughter's father." Several relatives exchanged uncomfortable glances. One of my cousins quietly asked, "Monica, are you absolutely sure about this?" She laughed once. "I wouldn't accuse my own sister if I wasn't." Then she lifted the document again. "And this proves Daniel intended to provide for his child." The room shifted. People weren't celebrating a birthday anymore. They were silently calculating inheritance, betrayal, and scandal. I looked more carefully at the pages she was waving. At first glance, they resembled Daniel's paperwork. The font, the formatting, even the signature. Close enough to convince almost anyone. Almost. Because months before he died, Daniel had looked at me across our kitchen table and said something I hadn't understood at the time. "If anyone ever questions my estate," he'd told me, "don't trust any paper they bring you." As Monica continued speaking, that memory came rushing back. I kept my smile. Inside, only one question mattered. Where did she get that copy? Monica lowered the papers just enough to meet my eyes. "So," she asked, "are you finally going to admit it?" Instead of answering, I took a slow step toward her. "Can we talk somewhere private for a minute?" She laughed loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Private? Why? You've had years to keep secrets. I'm done keeping mine." A few relatives shifted uncomfortably. My mother looked from Monica to me, clearly hoping one of us would end the confrontation. I kept my voice even. "This is your daughter's first birthday. She doesn't deserve to have this become a family spectacle." Monica shook her head. "No, everyone deserves to hear the truth." The room grew quieter. Children continued playing in the next room, completely unaware that the adults had stopped celebrating altogether. I stared at the document again. The cover page looked convincing. Too convincing. Daniel had always been meticulous about paperwork. Every legal document had a place. Every update had a reason. He'd once joked that if he ever misplaced a receipt, it would keep him awake all night. That memory brought another one rushing back. Several months before he died, we'd been sitting on our back deck overlooking the lake. His illness had already made him noticeably weaker, but his mind remained as sharp as ever. Without warning, he'd reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Claire, I know." "No," he'd interrupted gently. "Listen carefully." His expression had been unusually serious. "People change after someone dies." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "Grief is one thing, money is another." I had tried to dismiss it. Our family wouldn't fight over something like that. Daniel hadn't argued. He'd simply looked out across the water. "I hope you're right." After a long silence, he'd added one sentence that made little sense to me then. "If anyone ever shows you a copy of my will, don't assume it's the real one." Back at the birthday party, those words echoed in my mind. There was only one final version. Daniel had personally driven to his attorney's office to sign it. I remembered because he'd insisted we celebrate afterward with dinner at our favorite little restaurant. He'd smiled across the table that night. Everything's finally in order. Then another detail surfaced. He had specifically said the executed original would remain secured. Paper copies weren't supposed to settle anything. Only the attorney could. Monica interrupted my thoughts. "You've gone awfully quiet." "I'm thinking." "You're panicking." "I'm remembering." She smirked. "Remember all you want. Facts don't change." I looked more closely at the signature page she was holding. Something about it tugged at my memory. Not enough to identify. Just enough to know it wasn't quite right. Across the room, my aunt moved beside Monica. "Claire," she said carefully, "if Daniel really had another child, maybe the fair thing would be to work something out." Several heads nodded. No one wanted an ugly inheritance battle. No one wanted lawyers. Most wanted peace, even if it came at my expense. Monica saw the room leaning toward her. She smiled with growing confidence. I knew people would understand. I reached into my purse. Without saying a word, I unlocked my phone. Tap. Tap. One message. Only 6 words. "Please come, it's happening now." I pressed send, slipped the phone back into my purse and looked up. Monica crossed her arms. "Go ahead," she said with a smug smile. "Call whoever you want." The silence lasted only a few seconds before Monica broke it. "Since everyone's here," she announced, lifting the photocopies, "you should all know exactly what Daniel intended." She began handing the pages from person to person. Relatives who had come to celebrate a child's first birthday suddenly found themselves reading what looked like a legal document. Whispers spread across the room. "I can't believe this. Did Claire know? Why would Daniel hide something like that?" I stood still, letting everyone absorb the claim before I spoke. "Monica," I said calmly, "you're asking people to believe that Daniel secretly fathered your daughter, hid it from me, and somehow left instructions in a will no one has ever seen." She shrugged. "Sometimes the truth is ugly." A cousin looked at me with sympathy. "Claire, maybe you should hear her out." Before I could answer, Monica seized the moment. "I didn't want this to come out today," she lied smoothly. "But Claire inherited everything. My daughter deserves what belongs to her." She rested a hand on the stroller, using her sleeping child as the emotional center of the room. "I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for justice." Several relatives nodded. One uncle spoke up. "If there's even a chance the little girl is Daniel's, maybe the lake house should be divided until everything is settled." "Exactly," Monica replied. "I'm only asking for what's fair." The pressure shifted squarely onto me. Every face seemed to be waiting for me to either confess something or surrender. Instead, I walked over to one of the photocopies lying on the dining table. "May I?" Monica smiled confidently. "Please." I picked it up and studied the final page. The signature looked remarkably close to Daniel's. Close, but not perfect. I traced the margins with my eyes. Then I noticed something else. The witness section. Daniel had always insisted on initialing every page of important legal documents. Every single page. This copy had initials on the first 2 pages, but none on the page containing the property clause. I didn't say it aloud. Not yet. Across the room, Daniel's longtime friend, Richard, adjusted his glasses and stepped closer. "I witnessed Daniel signing paperwork once," he said slowly. "Not this will, another one years ago." Monica immediately pointed at him. "Then you know this is real." Richard hesitated. I know Daniel was particular. He looked at the document again. "I just can't say this is the one I remember." The certainty in the room weakened ever so slightly. Monica noticed it too. She quickly raised her voice. "Of course, you don't remember every document he ever signed." Then she turned back to me. "So what's your excuse now?" I folded the photocopy carefully and set it on the table. "My excuse?" "No," she corrected. "Your explanation." I met her eyes. Daniel updated his estate plan shortly before he died. A murmur rippled through the guests. Monica didn't even blink. "You're wrong. I was there." She laughed. "And this copy is newer." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across several faces. 2 competing stories now stood in the middle of the room. Neither had been proven. Neither had completely collapsed. Then the front door opened. Every head turned. A composed voice echoed through the entryway. "I'm here because Claire asked me to come." Every conversation stopped. The man standing in the doorway carried a slim black briefcase and wore the same composed expression I'd seen only twice before. Once when Daniel signed his final estate documents, and again at the memorial service. He looked directly at me. "Mrs. Bennet." I nodded. "Thank you for coming." Monica folded her arms. "And who exactly are you supposed to be?" The man stepped inside without raising his voice. "I'm Daniel Bennett's estate attorney." A wave of whispers rolled through the room. Monica forced a laugh. "Convenient." He ignored the comment. "I was told there is a dispute involving Mr. Bennett's will." "There isn't a dispute," Monica replied quickly. "There's proof." She held up her copy again. The attorney extended his hand. "May I see it?" She hesitated for just a moment before passing it over. "I hope you're prepared to admit Claire isn't the only heir." Without reacting, he placed Monica's copy on the dining table. Then he opened his briefcase and removed a sealed folder. "I won't discuss legal conclusions until I compare documents." He looked around the room. "I'd appreciate witnesses." Several relatives instinctively stepped closer. Even those who had supported Monica wanted to know which document was genuine. The attorney carefully laid both sets of papers side by side. He didn't rush. He compared each page in silence. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. His pen occasionally made small notes on a legal pad. No one spoke. Finally, he tapped the top page. "This formatting predates Mr. Bennett's final estate revision." Monica immediately interrupted. "So, people reuse templates." He continued, as though she hadn't spoken. "The page numbering is inconsistent." He pointed again. "These initials are reproduced electronically." He moved to the signature page. "And this clause concerning the lake house was removed before the final execution." Several relatives leaned in closer. One cousin frowned. "I don't understand." The attorney looked up. Mr. Bennett revised this section months before his passing. Monica's confidence wavered. You're just saying that because Claire hired you. I represented Daniel, he replied evenly. My obligation is to his estate. He turned another page. The execution date on this copy also conflicts with my office records. A heavy silence settled over the room. Richard, Daniel's longtime friend, quietly shook his head. I knew something felt off. Monica's voice sharpened. You're all letting lawyers confuse you. The attorney calmly reached back into his briefcase. There is one additional matter. He removed another sealed envelope with Daniel's signature across the flap. I was instructed to release these materials only if anyone challenged paternity or inheritance after Mr. Bennett's death. I felt my heartbeat quicken. Daniel had planned for this. Monica took a step backward. What's in that envelope? The attorney looked at her steadily, but didn't answer. Instead, he placed the unopened envelope beside the authentic estate file. Then he said quietly, There's one document left that answers every remaining question. No one moved. The birthday decorations, the untouched cake, the balloons tied to the high chair, they all felt strangely out of place as every eye fixed on the sealed envelope. The attorney broke the seal carefully. This package was prepared at Mr. Daniel Bennett's direction and stored with his final estate documents. He removed several papers and laid them neatly on the table. First, the authenticated will. He placed the original beside Monica's copy. Even without legal training, the differences were obvious. The original contained raised notary seals, handwritten initials on every page, and signatures that flowed naturally across the paper. The copy Monica had presented looked similar, but only from a distance. The attorney pointed to the forged version. This signature is a reproduction of one Mr. Bennett used years earlier. He turned another page. The property clause here was removed before Mr. Bennett executed his final will. He held up the authentic document. The lake house passed entirely to Mrs. Claire Bennett. Monica's face lost its color. No. The attorney continued. The version you presented appears to have been assembled using portions of an obsolete draft. A murmur spread through the room. My uncle picked up the forged copy and looked at it again. So, this isn't just outdated. The attorney met his eyes. No. He spoke each word clearly. It is not Mr. Bennett's executed will. The room fell silent. Then he reached for the second document. As directed by Mr. Bennett, I am also releasing confidential records relevant only if someone claimed to be the parent of his child after his death. He unfolded the medical authorization Daniel had signed months earlier. Mr. Bennett underwent treatment that left him medically incapable of fathering a child during the period in question. No one spoke. The words settled over the room with crushing finality. Monica stared at the document. That's impossible. The records are certified, the attorney replied. They were sealed unless this exact circumstance occurred. I suddenly remembered Daniel's expression on the deck that afternoon. If anyone ever questions my estate, don't trust any paper they bring you. He hadn't been hiding a secret. He had been protecting me from a lie. My mother slowly lowered herself into a chair. Oh, Monica. My cousin looked from Monica to me, his face filled with regret. We believed you. Another relative quietly said to me, Claire, I'm so sorry. No apology could erase the last hour, but hearing them acknowledge the truth mattered. Monica looked around the room, searching for someone to defend her. There has to be a mistake. The attorney remained calm. Can you explain the altered signature? She said nothing. Can you explain the missing initials? Silence. Can you explain how you obtained language from a draft that was never distributed outside authorized legal files? Her lips parted, but no answer came. The confidence she displayed only minutes earlier vanished. Guests who had stood beside her slowly stepped away. No one wanted to be associated with the forged documents anymore. One relative quietly picked up the birthday gifts and carried them into another room, giving the child some distance from the adult's conflict. The attorney closed the authentic estate file. I have a legal obligation to report suspected document forgery involving an estate. Monica's eyes widened. You'd call the police. If evidence indicates fraud, yes. She looked toward me for the first time without certainty. Claire, I interrupted gently. You didn't just accuse Daniel. My voice remained steady. You tried to rewrite his life after he was gone. She lowered her head. Within the hour, the celebration had ended. Guests left quietly, many stopping to apologize before walking out the door. The birthday cake remained uncut. The attorney stayed long enough to explain the next legal steps. A report would be filed regarding the forged documents. My own attorney would pursue recovery of the legal expenses created by the false inheritance claim. In the months that followed, Monica faced the consequences of her actions. The investigation into the forged paperwork moved forward. She became increasingly isolated as relatives realized how deliberately she had manipulated them. Family gatherings grew smaller, not because anyone was forced to choose sides, but because trust, once broken that completely, rarely returns overnight. As for me, I kept the lake house exactly as Daniel intended. That autumn, I spent a weekend there with a handful of family members who had stood beside me once the truth came out. We shared dinner on the deck, overlooking the water Daniel loved. We laughed for the first time in months. Before everyone left, I walked down to the shoreline alone. The wind moved gently across the lake. I thought about that final conversation we'd shared. At the time, I'd believed he was worrying unnecessarily. Now I understood. His last gift wasn't the house. It wasn't the inheritance. It was making sure the truth could outlive him. I locked the front door that evening, looked out across the quiet water one last time, and knew that no lie would ever rewrite Daniel's legacy.